Welcome back. When we left off last, Gordon was kicking Lorraine out of his house. Lorraine stood and left, laughing quietly. That afternoon, Gordon went by the bar. "Help you set up, Joe?" he asked as soon as he was through the door. Joe looked up in surprise. No thanks, Gordon, and we're not open." "Joe, listen," Gordon continued as if he hadn't heard. "I saw you yesterday when I was talking to Lorraine." "Talking, yeah," Joe laughed. "Listen, Joe," Gordon began again. Joe interrupted him. "No, Gordon, you listen. This thing with Lorraine is just crazy. That relationship tested our friendship 15 years ago, and now?" He looked up at Gordon. "I just can't believe you would be so stupid. She doesn't care about anybody except herself. She doesn't even care whether or not she sees Lillian, for God's sake." "Yeah, Joe, I know all that." Gordon poured himself a beer. "What part of 'we're not open' did you not understand?" Joe asked. "And it's a little early, don't you think?" "No, actually. Join me." Gordon poured for Joe, finished his own beer, and poured another for himself. "Joe, you're the last person to be talking to about all of this, but..." Gordon downed beer too and poured a third. "You okay there, Gordon?" Joe asked with a laugh. "So here's the thing," Gordon said. He just couldn't believe that Lorraine had walked back into town and he had simply crumbled on the pavement. He had to do something, to say something to somebody, so he told Joe. He told him about what he said to Lorraine so many years ago and what he had told her now. It all sounded so much worse out loud. "So," Joe began, sitting down again at the bar with his second beer, "let me understand this. The reason Doris left Dysonville is because Lorraine threatened to expose her and Helen because 15 years ago, when you were sleeping with my pregnant wife, you told her all about them." Joe got up and filled both glasses. "Then Lorraine leaves town and now she's back. Why is she back, Gordon?" "No idea," Gordon replied. "And," Joe continued, "now Lorraine knows all about the place in Silver because you told her about that yesterday after sex." Joe took a long drink of his beer and laughed aloud. "Gordon, if you can't stay out of that woman's pants, we're going to have to zip your mouth." Joe was surprised at the emotional indifference that accompanied this outbreak. He continued, "Granted, this is in some ways pretty funny, and I hope Lorraine is truly irritated. And where did she get the money to leave in the first place? I know she didn't take it from me. You know Lorraine would never go anywhere without money." "I don't know." Gordon looked at Joe. Joe seemed not to believe him. "Really, Joe," Gordon continued, "I told Lorraine about Mom and Helen." Gordon stopped and drank. "I told her about Mom and Helen, and that was it. A couple of months later, Lorraine and Mom were gone. Helen told me where Mom went, that Lorraine had pretty much blown the whole thing. We so wanted to call her and tell her what an idiot she was. Helen heard from Mom the very day she left." Gordon poured another for himself and for Joe. "Is there a tab I need to be running here?" Joe asked. "And now all of these years later," Gordon said as if he hadn't heard, "I'm supposed to keep this secret? Hell, I couldn't wait to tell her that she screwed it up. The thing is that she seemed kind of happy to hear about it. Don't know what that was about." "When does anyone ever know what anything is about with Lorraine?" Joe replied. They drank and laughed despite themselves. Chapter 10. Lorraine was pacing her very new living room, lost in thought. She had barely unpacked. She couldn't repress a smile. It was certainly no concern to her whether Doris was in Dysonville or Silver or La La Land, and she was equally unconcerned, however amused, that the relationship had continued. But Polly, in the dark for all these years, Lorraine called that very afternoon. "Hello," Polly answered. "Polly, this is Lorraine. I need to talk to you." Polly swallowed and tried to steady her voice. "We need to talk a bit further about Helen, Polly. About Helen and Doris," Lorraine continued. "Lorraine, don't mention Doris Martin to me ever again, and you're not getting any more money out of me. The townhouse is it," Polly responded. "Go away. Go make people miserable somewhere else." "Well, actually, I'm not asking for more money, but if I were, you would pay it, Lorraine continued. Polly knew she was right. Well, this is deja vu, isn't it? Lorraine laughed. Once again, I can let you in on a problem you don't even know you have. I'm coming over. This won't do over the phone. Lorraine hung up before Polly could object. Polly met her on the porch, drink in hand. Okay, Lorraine, what is it this time? Lorraine took an unoffered seat and reached for Polly's arm. You should sit down, Polly. This will be somewhat of a shock. How's your heart these days? Polly shook Lorraine off her arm and sat, waving her toward the driveway. Tell me why you're here, or stop wasting my time, Lorraine. Oh, I don't think you'll find this conversation a waste of time. I think you'll find this conversation very, very compelling. Lorraine took out a cigarette, lit it, and took a drag. I'm here to tell you that it didn't work. Who'd have thought it, but it didn't work. Polly looked up, trying not to show interest. What didn't work, Lorraine? Our plan, Lorraine continued, taking a drag and leaning back in her chair. You remember our plan, Polly? The one where you gave me money to leave this godforsaken backwater of a town, and I sent your best friend's black lesbian lover packing? Well, she packed, but... Lorraine was laughing now. Lorraine, Polly yelled. Okay, Lorraine continued. It's just that she didn't exactly leave. Well, she did leave, but somehow we neglected to tell her how far to go. Lorraine just couldn't control her laughter. Polly had the urge to slap her. Lorraine, make sense. What are you saying? Polly listened in silence, then suddenly looked up at a very serene Lorraine, now sitting on the porch wall. So you're telling me that Helen and Doris are still together, that they have always been together all this time, 15 years, 25 years? Now Polly looked directly at Lorraine. You moron! You sent her to Silver? Lorraine smiled and swung her cross-legged. Polly, you paid me to get Doris out of Dysonville. After that, I could care less, but you've got to give them credit, don't you think? Doris simply moved 20 minutes away. The affair continues. They've been deceiving you, and you never even suspected. You have to love that. Shut up, Lorraine. Polly stood. Just shut up and come to think of it. Why should I believe you? You're certainly not beneath making something like this up just to watch me squirm. And in any case, Helen would never have forgiven me. This is a crock. It's fun to watch you squirm, Polly. You're such an easy target, and you're confused. Helen only knows that I threatened to expose the two of them if Doris didn't get the hell out of Dodge. Only Doris knows about your part in this. She's staying away from Dysonville and protecting Helen from your betrayal. That's how much she loves her. Now Polly was pacing the porch. Her head was swimming. She was angry, anxious, scared, confused, all at the same time. She stopped and turned toward Lorraine. How do you know all of this? Lorraine smiled. Gordon told me. Gordon. So he knows where she is as well, Polly replied angrily. Gordon and Helen have been visiting Doris all along, whenever they wanted to. God, Polly, you should see your face. Lorraine laughed and lit another cigarette. You're making this up, Polly replied loudly, pacing again. You have to be. This is nonsense. No, Polly, you've been royally had. Lorraine was smiling broadly. Your karma has gotten you. What will Helen think if she finds out that you were a part of this all along? That this was pretty much all your idea? You just keep those payments coming. If I were you, Lorraine, I would get out of my sight now. Polly went inside and slammed the door. She was having difficulty understanding what she had just heard. Helen, her closest friend, the friend she had protected, had been deceiving her for all these years, and Helen had never slipped, not once that Polly could bring to mind. She wanted to find her and shake her, make her come to her senses. But then Helen would know, and it would all be over. Polly cringed as she relived the memory she couldn't escape, that she had been the one to bring Doris into Helen's life in the first place. And now, she had tried so hard and been so sure she had succeeded. She had paid and risked so much. For what? For nothing. What is wrong with Helen? What is wrong with her? She said aloud and dissolved into tears. Chapter 11. Andrew, Joe said as his barkeep entered the room. Andrew, can you open for me? Andrew smiled at Joe and replied, Sure, boss, take your time. Joe had no idea what he was going to do. He needed to talk to Lorraine. He needed the whole story. There were gaps, too many gaps, so much that didn't make sense. Joe rang the doorbell of Lorraine's townhouse at 4 p.m. Lorraine answered, Joe, well, this is a surprise. Gordon's not hiding in the bedroom, is he? Joe asked. Lorraine turned and smiled. No, not at the moment. Want to come in? Joe walked in and leaned unsteadily on the first chair he saw. Lorraine, I want to know only 2 things from you, and then I never want to see you again. Lorraine had poured herself a scotch. Want to join me? She asked. Joe walked toward her, grabbed her arm, and turned her toward him. No, Lorraine, not now. Just listen. Okay, Joe. Okay, calm down. You're scaring me a little bit. Lorraine pulled her arm away and sat. Good, Lorraine, that's good to hear, because I demand the truth out of you, and right now, what are you doing here? How did you leave in the first place? Actually, answer the second question first. How on earth did you leave town without any money? The answer is you didn't, Joe said as well. Okay, pour me one. Lorraine poured, watching Joe carefully as he continued. The answer is that you left somehow with funds. I know you did, because you would never, ever be without money. So who did you hit up, and why did it work? Joe sat back and took a drink. Lorraine began. Joe, I'm sorry. Ha! Don't even go there, Joe said forward. Okay, Lorraine said again. What do you want me to say? I want to know why you left, how you left, and most importantly, when you're leaving again, Joe replied. You're drunk, Lorraine sipped her drink. Lorraine, I'm not leaving without answers, Joe replied loudly. It was clear to Lorraine that this was true. At last she replied, Talk to Polly, Joe. Talk to Polly. What? Joe asked with some irritation. Talk to Polly, Joe, really, and get out. I have nothing more to tell you. Lorraine hoped he would consider her request. Lorraine, I swear, he took her by both shoulders. Joe, stop. Listen. You want to know how I got the money to get out of town 15 years ago? Talk to Polly, Lorraine insisted. Joe left without a goodbye. He needed a minute to register what he had heard. He decided that if he were going to talk to Polly, he needed to clear his head with a walk first. Talk to Polly? Why on earth would he get answers from Polly about Lorraine? Whether by instinct or by accident, Joe ended up at Helen's door. He knocked. Helen answered and invited him in. Well, when did this party start? Helen asked as Joe hugged her. Let's see. I think around 2. Gordon and I met at the bar, Joe responded. At the bar? Your bar that should be open now, and you're here, drunk? Asked Helen. Andrew's covering, Joe told her. And I'm not drunk, but I wouldn't turn down another. Sit on the porch. I'll bring martinis for us both, or would you rather have a beer? Helen asked. Better stick with the beer, Joe responded. Helen returned with a martini for herself and beer for Joe. Polly will be here in a couple of hours. She's having supper with some friends who came in from out of town. Joe hadn't thought of finding Polly at Helen's, although this was Helen and Polly's usual plan on any given afternoon. Today he was glad their plans had been postponed. So Joe, how are you? Are you still ready for the party? Not too far off now. Sure, Helen, but that's not why I'm here. I've just come from Lorraine's, Joe began. Lorraine's? Why is everyone talking to Lorraine? I still can't imagine what she's doing in town. We can't let her ruin Alice's party or her gift, Helen smiled at Joe. No, of course not. But Helen, listen. I want you to tell me what you think about something. It's important. He finished his beer, wondering if it might be one too many. Sure, Joe, anything for you. You know that. Helen took Joe's hand and smiled broadly. I know. Joe squeezed her hand and smiled in return. It's just that between conversations with Gordon about Lorraine and conversations with Lorraine about Lorraine, I need some answers about Lorraine and her disappearance. I know I shouldn't care, but I do, and I can't get Lillian out of my mind. If Lorraine messes with her, And who knows how long she'll be here. Joe sat back and tried to pull together his thoughts. Helen, I'm going to hit your bathroom. I'll be right back. When he returned, he felt some semblance of reason returning as well. He knew what he needed to know. He was just somehow afraid to ask the questions. So he continued finally. I talked to Gordon and Lorraine. Actually, I talked to Lorraine. Gordon talked to me. Not in that order, Joe rambled. Helen couldn't repress a smile. Anyway, Helen, between the two of them, I learned some interesting things. Okay, Helen sipped her drink. Okay, go on. I know what Lorraine tried to do to you and Doris, and that it just blew up in her face. Joe looked at Helen and laughed. She couldn't help but join him. I know, Helen answered. Lorraine butted in where she didn't belong, and then her plan just fell apart. Oh my God, does Lorraine know that? Is she here to pick up where she left off? I don't know, Helen. That's why I'm here. For you and for Lillian. I need to know what's up. I confronted Lorraine and she said something pretty weird. I'm here to ask you what you think, but Joe looked at Helen. Go on, Helen replied. It's about Polly, Joe continued. Polly? Helen looked at Joe and frowned. Joe continued. When I told Lorraine that I wasn't leaving the townhouse without answers, she told me to talk to Polly. Chapter 12. It didn't take Helen long to decide that none of this made sense. What could Polly know about Lorraine leaving town 15 years ago? Helen was lost in thought when she heard her front door open. Oh my God, it's Polly, Helen said to herself, then aloud. What's wrong with me? Of course it's Polly. Come in, she said more audibly. How was dinner? Helen, I'm not staying, Polly said almost immediately. I just came by to tell you that I'm tired and I'm going home and I'll call you tomorrow. She forced a smile and left. Okay, Helen said as Polly walked out the door, but she was relieved. Neither woman was ready to confront the other. What could either say? Polly was just too hurt and angry to talk, and all of this was just too new to Helen. She was thoroughly confused. The following morning, Helen arrived in Silver unannounced. When she knocked, Doris answered, looking somewhat concerned. Helen, hi, come in. I thought you and Gordon were going to call before you came by so as not to give me a heart attack, remember? Helen came through the door as if she hadn't heard. She walked through the living room, straight to the kitchen. Doris followed. We need to talk, Doris. Nothing's really wrong, I hope, but something pretty weird is going on. Weird? Like what? Doris asked, pouring coffee for both. Helen sat down at the kitchen table. She looked up suddenly, smiled, and took Doris's hand. I'm sorry, she said. How are you? I'm glad to see you. Doris smiled. Thank you. I'm glad to see you too. Now what on earth is going on? All right, Doris. Helen took a deep breath and continued. Here's the thing. Lorraine waltzed back into Dysonville Sunday morning. Doris swallowed hard. She couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. What? Lorraine? Lorraine Morgan? Hamilton? Whatever it is these days? Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't Gordon tell me? Helen suddenly flashed a smile. She showed up at church, Doris. Polly stopped me from hitting her right in the face. Helen, you're kidding. It's good that Polly stopped you, Doris replied. Really? Helen asked. Yes, really, Doris reiterated, but she couldn't suppress a smile. Helen continued. Anyway, I assume Gordon didn't tell you because he's your grown son and I know, he's putty in Lorraine's hands. So that means he hasn't spoken to me because he's already taken up with her again? Doris sighed and rolled her eyes. Helen continued, that's what I'm here to tell you, sort of. Doris looked at Helen and wondered what she was about to hear. She felt a little sick. Okay, Helen continued, here's the thing. Gordon told Lorraine about Silver. Doris was having a little bit of trouble believing what she was hearing, but she finally said, okay, but really, sweetie, after all this time, I'm inclined to say who cares, aren't you? On the other hand, why would he do that? One guess, Doris, Helen replied. Then Gordon told Joe about Silver. Doris looked up in true disbelief this time. Is there anyone left who doesn't know? She asked. Helen started to cry, but continued. Then Joe confronted Lorraine and, Sweetie, Doris said, Look at me. How bad is it? What's Lorraine going on about now? Helen continued. Joe confronted Lorraine. He was pretty drunk and pretty mad. He demanded answers. She finally told him to. She looked directly at Doris now. She told him to talk to Polly, Doris. I don't understand. I don't understand at all. Doris felt frozen in place. So, did you? She asked hesitantly. Did I what? Helen asked. Did you talk to Polly? Doris had to work to keep her voice steady. No, not yet anyway, you know. Helen wiped her eyes and drank her coffee. I think maybe I'm afraid to. Helen looked at Doris as if for answers. Doris felt relieved, but at the same time she felt almost desperate to know who at this point knew what. She took a deep breath, made every effort to suppress her anxiety, and began. Okay, first of all, why would Lorraine tell Joe to talk to Polly about us? Not about us, Helen replied. About why Lorraine left in the first place. Joe wanted answers about Lorraine, not about us. We just seem to somehow be entangled with all of that, and I just don't get that part. It's as if the two events, Lorraine's leaving and you're leaving, are connected in ways that aren't making sense to me. What on earth could Polly have to do with any of this? Doris ran from the room with her hand on her mouth, waving with the other as if to say, stay there, I'll be back. She felt as if she were sinking into some sort of murky pond. Could she deny knowledge of Polly's involvement even now? That would mean a lie on top of a lie. She needed time. She washed her face, returned to the kitchen, and said, Helen, I'm sorry. I'm just so tired. Not sure why. You are too, for obvious reasons. I think we should take a long, long nap. Helen smiled. Yes, a very long nap sounds wonderful. Later that afternoon, Doris made drinks, pina coladas, a habit formed on the beach trip. Helen had packed the ingredients, thinking that it was a very summery thing to drink. This was about the only good memory of the trip they had. The two sat in their robes and bedroom shoes on the living room couch. Helen smiled as Doris poured, but Doris was unsteady. The inevitable had only been delayed. It was very clear now that Helen had to know everything. Suddenly Doris's drink spilled. Helen ran for a kitchen towel. Are you that worn out? Helen smiled as she returned to the room. Then looking at Doris, she continued, seriously, Doris, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. A ghost. Well, that's one way to look at it. I have seen a ghost, Helen. The ghost of past decisions. The ghost of past mistakes. Doris leaned back on the couch. She looked. Helen couldn't think of another word for it. She looked defeated. Okay, what are you talking about? Helen demanded. Really, too much has happened lately for you to start being vague with me. You, the only person who always tells me the truth, who keeps me from making a fool out of myself, who... Doris could feel the tears welling up in her eyes. How did we get here? She thought to herself. What I did, everything I did, was because I love Helen. Isn't that right? Why am I being punished? She said aloud, and then turned to Helen. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I did the wrong thing, the easier thing, then and now. Doris dissolved into tears. No doubt I'm being punished. Wait, Helen replied with some alarm. Wait. Are you talking about us? Do you think now that we're a wrong thing? Because if that's what you think, after all these years... Helen's confusion was turning into frustration and anger. Never. Doris looked at Helen and took her hands. Never. I love you. You're perfect. We're perfect. That's why I lied. You lied? Helen asked. About what? I thought I was doing the right thing. That I had to lie. Doris was crying again. Whatever it is, just tell me. Tell me the truth, right now. If this is upsetting you so much, maybe I can help. Helen smiled at Doris. Doris couldn't smile back. She looked at her hands. The thing is, sweetie, there's really nothing to be done to help. It's over and done with. What, Doris? Helen lifted Doris's chin and held it so that Doris had to look straight into her eyes. What's over and done with? The threats, the losses, just the lies themselves. All over and done with, Doris replied and looked down again. Wait a minute, Helen suggested. Have your drink. sit a while, then tell me slowly and with some semblance of reason what on earth is making you so unhappy. Whatever it is, I love you and I know you love me. Whatever it is, we'll handle it." Doris looked up with significant doubt in her eyes. "We will. We really, really will," Helen reiterated. "I know it has something to do with Polly. Start there." Doris sighed. "It starts and ends there, really. It was Polly," she continued, without meeting Helen's eyes, "not Lorraine, who sent me away. It was Polly who insisted that I never return. Polly believes she has broken us up. I didn't tell you. I couldn't. I just couldn't." Chapter 13. Questions swarmed Helen's mind. A million possibilities seemed to present themselves to her, none of which made any sense. When she felt steady enough to ask, "It was Polly? Polly sent you away, Doris?" No, I know that isn't true because Lorraine did that." Helen was pacing, shaking her head, frowning, questioning. "Lorraine threatened us, Polly. Lorraine threatened us. Lorraine, not Polly. Polly wouldn't be involved. How would Polly even know?" "Lorraine," Doris answered quietly without looking up. "Lorraine? Why? I can't imagine Polly even talking to Lorraine, much less." Helen shook her head and tried to make sense of her thoughts. "So what exactly did Polly have to do with all of this?" Doris still focused on her drink. She didn't want to see Helen's face. "Doris," Helen repeated, "what exactly is Polly's involvement? Lorraine threatened you, threatened us, and..." Doris looked up now and saw the fear in Helen's eyes. "Helen, I'm so sorry I kept all this from you." "Kept all what?" Helen pleaded. Okay, Doris replied. She felt a surge of anger as she thought about her son's role in this drama. "Lorraine came to see me. She threatened me, us, but first she made Polly an offer. They made a deal. I'll stop there for this time. I hope you enjoyed it. See you next time."